All right, Mason, let's jump into another matchup. We've got the Miami Hurricanes at 2.5 point favorite on the road at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium there at Florida. This is a highly anticipated matchup and a rivalry game, of course, at two in-state teams there. The over/under is set at 55. You got Graham Mertz returning on offense. Billy Napier is on the hot seat a lot. Uh, you know, I guess, kind of decide where his career ends up as far as being the head coach of Florida. A lot have to do with what happens this season. And if Florida stands a chance, Mason, of making a bowl game and accomplishing some of the goals that they've set out for themselves, I think this is a game that they're probably going to have to win. This is one of the hardest schedules in the country. It's not a conference game, so it doesn't count as a conference loss if you do lose it. But um, this team needs momentum, and it's going to be hard to get it here in this first game against Miami, who hit the transfer portal and hit it hard. Brought in Cam Moore, Damian Martinez. You bring back Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George. You bring in a wide receiver, Sam Brown. I mean, the list goes on and on. Um, you return. It was just an okay offensive line last year for Miami, but you return a lot of those guys and a lot of reps. And as we said with Florida, you bring back Montrell Johnson, but you lose ETN to Georgia. So you feel like maybe there's a little bit of a depth issue there. Wide receiver, you bring back Eugene Wilson, but you lose Ricky Pearsall from last year, a absolute game changer and just a human highlight reel that guy was. He goes off to the NFL, and I suspect we'll do some good things. Um, but you lose Scooby Williams off of the defense. It just seems like there's a lot to be desired here on this Florida roster, and that's the reason why I think a lot of people have them winning, 5 or 6 games this season. What do you think about this matchup? And we'll kind of talk about the matchups within the matchup, right? What do you think kind of changes the game here for Florida or Miami to be able to pull this game off? Only 2.5 points sounds pretty low to me, Mason. I'm high on Miami. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to me, what's going to be really interesting is how this Miami team, how Cam Ward handles the swamp, because this is going to be the toughest environment he has ever played in, bar none. I mean, it's going to be rabid. This is a desperate Florida team, a desperate Florida fan base, and I think that the fans of Florida at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, they're gonna play a factor in this. They're going to be an actual 12th man on the field, right? So that to me is what's really interesting about this football game. I think if this game was played on a neutral site, I think that Miami would be a 7 point favorite, a touchdown favorite type of. I think that would be where the line is at, and I would still feel pretty good about Miami being able to cover. But being played in a hostile environment, a rivalry game, it'll be very interesting to see how Miami handles that. Um, I'm I'm really just looking at the playmakers for Florida. Look, if Florida's going to win this game, Graham Mertz has to be a huge part of it. Eugene Wilson also has to be a huge part of it. He's really the only playmaker that's returning that is healthy. We don't know the status of Montrell Johnson heading into this game. He's been battling a little bit of a knee injury. Not sure if Sab is going to have to, take some snaps here. Or excuse me, Trayon Webb. Not sure if he's going to have to step up and make some plays for this team. You certainly hope, if you're a Florida fan, that you get Montrell Johnson, because he was a big part of the offense. Over 1,000 total yards between running and catching the football. That's a huge loss if he's not able to go. So I think, to me, the connection between Graham Mertz and Eugene Wilson is going to be the catalyst for this team if they want to beat Miami, especially with what we know is coming up front for Miami on the defensive line. This is a team that has completely reloaded on the defensive line. They're one of the best in college football, and I expect them to be extremely disruptive to Graham Mertz. The Florida offensive line is, although they're pretty good on the left side, they're a little bit weak on the right side. I want to see how they hold up, right? This is, again, Miami's defensive line is going to be rotating guys in and out. They're going to be fresh. Can the offensive line for Florida step up and protect Mertz? Because I do think that they're going to have to win this game over the top at some point. Um, can they get Eugene Wilson the ball in creative ways? He's not just going to be a deep threat. He's got to get some end arounds. If the passing game's not working very well, can they get him some wide receiver screens and just get that guy the football? He was great as a true freshman last year. I expect him to do really well this season as well. And then for Miami, looking at this defense, I think that they're completely reloaded. However, I've still got questions in the defensive backfield. It sounds like Miami's done enough to kind of fill that void in the defensive secondary. It sounds like everything from everything we've heard coming out of fall and spring camp, it sounds like the defensive backfield is ready to play. We just got to see it. On paper, Miami is a better team than Florida. Nobody's denying that. But Miami's had the better roster for several seasons. The better roster in the ACC, I guess, or at least a really good roster, and they haven't met their own expectations as a program. Can they get it done on the field? We know Mario Cristobal and his abilities to recruit, but can they finally put it together on the field? They're my pick to win the ACC. This game will not change that, whether they win or lose, but I think that Miami winning this game is going to prove a lot for Mario Cristobal and for the Miami Hurricanes as a program. I think that they do get it done. And to me, it's going to come down to the defensive line for Miami. Are they able to get pressure? Are they able to stop the run? I think the answer is yes. How do the DBs hold up? Right? I mentioned, the matchup to me is Eugene Wilson and these wide receivers and Graham Mertz against the defensive backfield. If Miami's able to win that competition, I think that they win this football game. And then what I want to see on offense is just an identity being created. Cam Ward comes over from Washington State. He's got really high expectations. I do think that he's the best quarterback for Miami in over 20 years. Can he prove that in this game? I think the answer is going to be yes. He's going to be hitting guys like Xavier Restrepo, and also Damian Martinez could be getting his legs going in this game. Although I do think I do think Florida is going to be pretty good up front on the defensive line, particularly in stopping the run. A lot of new faces, but I do feel pretty good about them slowing this Miami rushing attack down. So I think some of that burden is going to be placed on Cam Ward. Can he rise to the occasion and take advantage of an also kind of weak Florida secondary? I think that Florida lost a lot in the transfer portal on the defensive line, and on the defense as a whole. A lot of new faces on the defense for Florida. Can Miami take advantage of it? I think the answer is yes. 2.5 points to me is just not enough for Miami. I do think that they cover. Also, 54.5 feels like a lot for the over under. I would play the under on this one and kind of thread the needle. Miami covers with the 2.5 points, but the under is the play for me at 54.5. I don't think that Florida gets above 20, and then Miami could still score 30 or 33 points, and they would cover. Obviously they would cover the 2.5, but also the under would hit. Give me that play here. I feel really good about Miami. I would feel good about Miami at 6 points, even at the Swamp. Anxious to hear your thoughts. I'm hearing a lot of people say that Florida playing at home gives them the edge in this game. It's certainly an edge. I think that Ben Hill Griffin's one of the toughest places to play. But when you compare the rosters, we've done our homework, and I invite you all to go back and look at the Miami breakdown that we did. But we looked at this roster, and it's pretty stout all the way through. Really good everywhere except for the defensive backfield. I think they're a little bit thin, but at this point, all of those guys are healthy. So can they make some stops in the defensive backfield? What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, we'll talk about the defensive backfield first. Then can Cormani McClain, who comes back over, he comes over from Colorado. Can he step up? I guess he's kind of like an X factor because you talk about the depth in the defensive secondary. If that's a guy that you can rely on, then I feel pretty good about this secondary, right? Excuse me, he's coming over to Florida. I'm sorry, I'm getting my teams mixed up here. Cormani McClain comes over from Florida. That's going to be an X factor for their defensive backfield. Miami hit the transfer portal really, really hard for their defensive backfield. I feel better about it, but they were 55th nationally last year against the pass. So I'm not like super hot on either one of these secondaries at the moment. But with that being said, Mason, what threat is Florida's wide receiver room at this point? I understand, you bring back Eugene Wilson and definitely a playmaker, no doubt about it, and he's going to have to be for this team. But I just don't see a whole lot of answers in that wide receiver room behind Eugene Wilson. Whereas we look at Miami and we kind of look at their pass game versus the Florida secondary. We'll kind of go back to that. Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo percent have confidence in to be able to put the team on his back if he needs to and get that first down on 3rd and 10 or whatever. But Cam Ward comes in. Damian Martinez comes in. It's just too much. I think it's just too much for this Florida defense that is reeling at this point. I mean, let's be real. Florida hasn't been to a bowl game in a long time at this point. I don't think they're making one this year. This team is on the wrong track. Miami's on the right track. With Florida State losing yesterday, as we're recording this, the ACC's wide open for Miami at this point. Florida State is not the team that the national media wanted to dress them up as to start the year. I'm sorry, they just weren't, and we knew that. We talked about that here on the First and Long College Football Show. Fade Florida State, and that's what we did in our top 25 to start the year, and they're going to fall out of the top 25 now. So it's wide open for Miami. I understand that this is at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. This is going to be a hell of an environment, and that's part of the attraction for me as a college football fan. I want to see, that environment. I know it's going to be lit, and that's great. But I don't think a guy like Cam Ward is going to be a guy that's going to be faced by that. I just don't. This guy is an absolute gamer. He's got the it factor. I feel the same about Restrepo, Damian Martinez. We'll see. We'll see if this offensive line can perform. That's going to, kind of depend on it. That's going to, change the outcome of this game for sure. You're going to need the offensive line to get going, which I think is better this year versus last year. You return a lot of talent there. So, with all that being said, Mason, I am kind of going a little crazy on this one. I think Miami wins this game 42-21. I don't think it's even close. I
Okay.
think it's a track meet for Miami early. I think Florida scores a couple of touchdowns there in the second half to make it look maybe not quite as bad, but I think Miami's about to stomp Florida. That's what I think is about to happen, and I think it's going to be a coming out party for this Miami offense through the air. I think they're going to be able to run the football. I think they're going to be able to do a lot of whatever they want in this game. I'm fading the Florida Gators. I'm not going to play the over. I'm just going to play in this game. I feel most confident about the 2.5. I'm laying the 2.5 here with Miami. Obviously, I think they can win this game by at least 10. I think worst case scenario, Miami wins this game by 10 points. I just sorry, Florida Gators, but I mean, this is just not the team. This is not the team, and I think Miami is a team that's down for the college football playoff in 2024.
So I'm anxious to hear, Mark. Do you think that Billy Napier, being in the hot seat, he takes a loss here against Miami? I mean, how hot is this thing going to be for Billy Napier? Is he destined to be fired midseason?
Billy Napier was destined to be fired the moment he was hired. This is not a this guy's not a good fit for the Florida Gators. And honestly, Mason, right now I don't know what is a good fit for the Florida Gators. There's a lot of talk that there has to be some like administrative changes across the board before this football team is going to be able to really become a football program. Um, Again, it's been a long time, guys. It's been a long time since we've seen Florida, at the heights that we remember in the, '05 through '08, era. That this team is a long, long, long ways away from that. And what's so bad about it is they recruit top 10 every year, just about. If you go look at their recruiting rankings, they recruit top 10 a lot because of where they're located, right there in the state of Florida, which is a hotbed for high school football. So, the resources I feel like are there. There's a lots of turmoil. There's a certain quarterback within the SEC that's suing the program right now. There's just a lot going on for the University of Florida, and not to mention all the turnover on their roster. So to answer your question, this seat is going to be as hot as it can possibly get. But I think for the Florida Gators, I think you're just kind of stuck with Billy Napier this season. I don't think it's. I mean, who are you hiring? Who are you about to hire? Right? I think you're best off to try to keep Billy Napier as long as possible. Keep some of the recruits committed that he's trying to bring in, and try to keep some of the young guys happy that he's recruited there. Because at this point, I think he might actually be Florida's best bet at this point. I think you need to hold on to him and just hope that the something turns around here. But his style as a head coach just doesn't match the Florida Gators fan base. They want to score a bunch of points and beat everybody 11-0, and he's not going to do that. That's not the kind of coach this guy is. He's more than happy to win 23-14 and 21-17. And that's just not Florida's style. But I think they're going to have to hold on to him for now.